Good morning, everybody. It's the 2nd of December 2025. We're going through a period now of exposure. We've talked about it for a couple of years now. And at the moment, the police in the UK and the police in America are being exposed as corrupt. And the reason that this corruption has crept in is because they've moved away from protecting and serving the public. They've become controlled by money and power. And of course, the police force in the UK is a limited company. And limited companies need to make money. We've had a very interesting thing happen in the last 48 hours. Over 100 people have filed complaints with the police about Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer committing fraud against the British people. And the police have refused to log the complaint. And so if you want to complain, you have to complain about matters like that to the Houses of Parliament. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. But this confirms the fact of what I've been saying. We're watching a movie. This is all pantomime. This bit is for the thick people out there, so that they start to get it as well. Morning, Paul. Morning, Drew.
Good morning, Charlie. Well, my first story, speaking of pantomime, Honduras is in election limbo as the two leading presidential candidates, supposed right-wing Nasri Azfura and centrist Salvador Nasrallah, are separated by just 515 votes. The Electoral Commission has called for patience, but the official website has collapsed, fueling tension and confusion. US President Trump, a supporter of Azfura, has accused officials of trying to alter the results. Now, Charlie, something we're seeing breaking in the last few hours is that the military has stormed the voting booths and shut down voting early to stop, dare I say it, Trump's person getting in.
Well, they've used the same playbook as was used in America. The only thing was they didn't need to storm the building, they just burst the water pipes. If you remember, during the election, there was burst water pipes everywhere. And the rigging of elections is not something new. It's gone on for, as far as I can see, for at least 25 years, maybe longer. One of the biggest ones in the UK was the Brexit vote. But for government, it's been going on for a very long time. The rigging of elections in the UK, every single one for the last 20 years has been rigged. Having said that, they're both cheeks of the same backside. Doesn't matter who gets in, because they don't control anything. The people who control the UK is Whitehall, the engine behind the scenes that never changes. And of course in America they've learnt the same with the powers behind the scenes. People thought they voted for a president, and behind the scenes Israel controlled what was going on in America. We're now seeing that. It's all part of the pantomime, all part of the exposure. Are you awake yet? Morning, Drew. That was a question for the audience, not for you. I know you're wide awake, Drew.
Well, speaking of corruption, the UK, the military, and all of that exposure coming out, new evidence has put even more pressure on the UK authorities already facing corruption claims. This time over deadly actions by British Special Forces in Afghanistan that senior officers were warned about. A former top UK Special Forces officer known as N1466 told the inquiry that people inside the unit were raising alarms. He said there were claims that one team had a rule of shooting any fighter-age man they found, even if he wasn't a threat. He also said that raid reports often showed more people killed than weapons found, and that excuses about detainees suddenly grabbing guns or grenades after being caught didn't make sense.
Well, these are very, very important issues, and while we're on that subject, there's 2 points I want to make. Number one, I take my hat off to Ant Middleton, a young man who's standing up for the truth. The British government are trying to silence him, telling the truth about the refugees that are in the UK that are not refugees. And also, a man who's served his country, who's defended his country, who stood up for your human rights so that you've got rights. These are people that need to be respected. Secondly, I have sat on many occasions in America with mothers whose sons were killed by their own military. This sort of behaviour needs to stop. And this whole journey is about waking people up to what's really going on in the world. Very important times this. We've only got one chance to make sure that we make a change. And that chance and that time is now. Paul.
Well, my next story, exposure in Europe. Belgium has delivered a firm no to a European plan to use frozen Russian assets to help fund Ukraine. The country holds a huge portion of those assets and says tapping them now would create major legal and financial risks. Belgium's foreign minister argues that if the plan were truly safe, other EU countries would be willing to share the risks, but they aren't. And even Euroclear, the institution holding the funds, has warned that using them could look like outright confiscation and undermine Europe's financial credibility. Charlie, you can just see the European mafia is collapsing before us.
They are, and we talked about this 2 or 3 years ago, Paul, the collapse of the EU, the collapse of the dollar, the collapse of NATO, the collapse of the UN. And we're now seeing it in plain sight. For those involved in it, it's not nice to see. But for those of us who've known it's happened, it's already happened, by the way. For those people watching, it's already happened 3 years ago, nearly 4 years ago. This has all been done, but we're now seeing it play out. And the EU, we've got a classic case in Spain that made me laugh my head off, because the EU has told them to put these facial recognition systems in the airport. So they've spent millions and millions and millions and millions of taxpayers' money on these new facial recognition and fingerprint identity within Spain. Now every airport's got them. They worked for 2 weeks. And then somebody took AENA, the Spanish airport company, to court and lost under the Data Protection Act. Because Spain has its data protection probably the strictest in Europe. And of course the European Union orders directives and policy, not law. So the European Union forced them to break their own law, which resulted in them getting a fine of 10 million euros. Over policy. It's time to wake up to what is law and what is policy. Of course, the EU can't make laws, it can only make policy. Wakey, wakey, your days are over. I did say it would collapse, and now we're seeing it completely collapse. And Spain is going, well, hang on, how did we get fined by the people who told us to do it? My father used to say, Satan will lead you into trouble and then laugh at you when you're there. The EU is laughing at Spain, but that'll only last for a period, because Spain will wake up and go, we're going to join Italy. We're going to join Hungary. Bye-bye.
Following on from that, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has shocked the country by asking President Isaac Herzog for a full pardon, even as his corruption trial drags on. Herzog's office says Netanyahu sent a personal letter along with a 111-page plea from his lawyer, calling the request extraordinary with major consequences. Netanyahu's lawyer claims a pardon would let the PM focus fully on leading the country and would help calm deep public divisions. The president's legal team and the Justice Ministry will now review the request before Herzog makes a decision. Netanyahu has spent nearly a decade fighting corruption charges, bribery, fraud, and breach of trust, all of which he denies. His critics say he's using ongoing crises to delay the trial and cling on to power.
Well, he's in a very difficult position because the moment he loses power, he goes to prison for life or gets executed. And he knows that. So when you're in that position, you'll do anything you possibly can. My final story today is an interesting one because we've pointed the finger at the Jews and what they've been involved in. We've pointed the finger at the Muslims for what they've been involved in. And there's been some smug little people out there pointing the finger. But today's the day we point the finger at the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church. We talked about them about 3 years ago. These are two churches that are huge. The Church of England was widely revered around the world. The Roman Catholic Church, much the same. Sadly, both have been involved in child trafficking.
Allegedly.
Paedophilia. You don't need to worry about me telling the world. You don't need to worry about me one little bit. God has been watching you. God saw what you've been doing. And you don't have to answer to me. You'll have to answer to God. And because God is watching everything, I don't need to provide any evidence. You've done it all yourself. I'll leave you with that thought. On the 2nd of December 2025, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Noble Gold. Real assets. Real value. Your wealth protected.